welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Not just any episode. While Tony and I were kvetching in the green room, our executive producer, Kevin Pace, reminded us that this is the 1,600th episode of the Nonprofit Show.
Wow, congratulations.
Congratulations is in order. Um, yeah,
That's
that's
a
just a
lot.
lot.
It's a
That
lot of shows. I should have brought my party hat.
Well, it's hard to believe. It's hard to say because it just seems like yesterday we started this. Every day is a new and different day, believe it or not, even though we're on air 5 days a week. And so, thank you to everyone who has joined us. Tony Beall was one of the very first people that we started working with 7 years ago, and it has really been a treasured part of my life. And wow, super cool to talk with the people and meet the different people that we've met with. So
Hmm.
Tony, thank you to you, definitely.
Oh, thank you. Congratulations.
Well, thanks. It's been a lot of fun. Today we're going to talk about escalating your professional value. And sometimes this can help us make more money. It can help us just feel better about ourselves. It can help us get more respect within our community, maybe even within our own organization. And so we want to talk about this. We address a lot of these things in the architecture of fundraising, but I think what Tony and I decided was let's pull these out separately and just talk about working on you. How do you raise your professional value so that you're not just that fundraising person, but you're perceived more as a C-suite leader? We want to make sure that we thank our amazing partners, Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Third Sector Company, Your Part-Time Controller, and Intuit QuickBooks. I'm Julia C. Patrick, of course, the amazing Tony Beall of Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy, joining us today, as he does every Friday. So, Tony, beyond the fundraising role, I want to ask the question about leadership. And I mentioned this to you in the green room, but I was at an AFP chapter meeting in my community. Uh, I am not a member of AFP, but I go every year to the Giving USA report that's released in Phoenix.
Mhm.
And I was sitting around this table, people I didn't really know, and they started talking about how they believed that the chief development officers in our community were the fast tracked chosen few to become CEOs of nonprofits. And I know you're the president of an AFP chapter in Southern Florida. What do you think about this, about that leadership connection?
Yeah, I think it's natural to assume that the director of development or chief development officer would be the natural kind of successor to a CEO or executive director role. I think a lot of that comes from the relationships that the development professional
Yes.
has, not only within the organization, with the board of directors, but with the community at large. So when a fundraising professional steps into executive director or C-suite role, now they're performing in that seat, already having the earned credibility of the majority of their supporters and community champions. So I think it's pretty natural to think of that. That it's like, oh well, it'll be the development. Why should I apply? It'll be the development director. Uh,
Interesting.
but there are a lot of, I think, good reasons why people would think that and make that assumption.
So, in your career, as you think about the trajectory of it, has that been always apparent, or is this more of a new thing? Like, I guess I'm trying to get the feel for how has this role and this leadership position been elevated to an extent where people are automatically pushing them into CEO levels?
I think part of it is, and you and I talk a lot about how some of the subjects and themes of our conversations are not necessarily new to the sector. It's
Mhm.
just a new way of looking at them and kind of reframing them. So I think as we continue to send the message of the importance of relationships, that historically, when a nonprofit may have moved someone that was a CFO or involved in financials in the organization to that executive director or CEO level. They're finding that having someone that has more of those relationship skills, and not to say that CFOs and accountants aren't great people,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know
Of
what I'm
course.
saying? But
Yeah, yeah.
so we're historically folks may have been put in those roles because of their keen fiduciary responsibility. There's now this realization that the relationships may be the larger necessity when you're kind of weighing out the importance of those different skill sets.
It's when you said that, it's just astonishing to me how often a conversation that you and I have, whether it be on camera or off, so much of it comes back to relationship management, doesn't it?
Always, everything in life.
It's so, yeah, everything in life, everything in life. Yeah, that's magical thinking. Yeah, that's super cool. Okay, so that's a good way to level set this. Um, and part and parcel to that, how do we understand or how do we push ourselves to understand the business model outside of fundraising? Because sometimes, we're so invested in what we've got to do with our team, we're not really able to learn or even engage in some of those other operational aspects. How do we
Yeah,
navigate
well,
that?
yeah, I'm sorry, Julie. Yeah, I mean, running a nonprofit is not a mystery. It's not, oh, how do I do this? And we often say, I'm not the architect of this statement. Well, I've heard this statement throughout my entire career. That 501(c)(3) is a tax status, not a business model.
Mhm.
And some people get turned off when they hear nonprofit professionals say, well, I run my nonprofit like a business. Well, it is a business.
Mhm.
If you look at your articles of incorporation, there is INC at the end of the name of the formal name of your organization. So attending trainings that take place at your Chamber of Commerce, I think Chamber of Commerce is such a tremendous value to communities and nonprofits engaging in uh, the workshops and membership at a local Chamber of Commerce is important for this aspect. So you're attending marketing meetings and you're attending all of these trainings that are really designed for a for-profit. But when we take that out of it, you are really attending training on how to run a business, whether
Mhm.
that's fiduciary, whether it's marketing, whether it's human resources.
Mhm.
So really leaning into those opportunities, like I said, through a chamber of commerce and understanding the other aspects of running a successful business.
Yeah, I love that you framed that up because you're absolutely right. That the IRS is the one that designates who can call themselves a nonprofit or not, and this is not a business model. It is just a structure. We still have to make money. We still have to generate revenue in order to do our work. And so you're absolutely right. I think that's a super cool way to kind of frame that up and make it more essential to learning, right?
Hmm.
You have to be able, if you're going to move up that professional ladder, you've got to be able to recognize what the other areas of leadership you're going to be called upon to lead.
And
And so,
yeah,
yeah,
and
really.
I think that most folks, if they are like one step away from, serving in a C-suite or executive director role, they I will assume already have a pretty good grasp on this understanding that there are many aspects of running a
Mhm.
successful company or organization, and they're going to need to level up on all of those.
Right. So then that leads me to my next question for you and part of our discussion, because it's a really interesting thing to be um, aware or have knowledge or have worked a little bit, dabbled in some of these other areas of a nonprofit and of the structure that we're serving in. But the at the end of the day, we have to be able to lead, right? Whether we know all there is to know, and if we can just observe and offer solutions, That's really huge. But my question, I guess, goes to the heart of the matter of if you've been a chief development officer, how well are you going to be able to lead an operations team or lead, your finance department or programming? Is leadership just good leadership, or do you need to know about these specific things?
Yeah, well, I'm just grinning because I love the word dabble and I love to dabble in things. So that was a great way to cue this up for me. So the ability to observe organizational issues. I think it's our responsibility, especially once you are at a director level or above, to really look at the organization holistically and to really take a big picture approach to everything that's happening. Uh, I'll just kind of I'll start with that. Now,
Yeah.
your organizational culture may be one that says, stay in your lane.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
you are a fundraiser. You're not responsible for the deliverables of the grant. You're just responsible for getting us the grant. Um, but
Yeah.
you, but in your work in fundraising and as a fundraising professional within your organization, you typically need to understand the processes and the outcomes so that when you're having conversations with investors and donors, you can really speak to how the gears turn within the organization. So when I'm saying to a potential donor or investor, we feed X number of people in our community, then I can say, and this is how we do that. We do it through a mechanism of blah, 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 that then, is touched by these folks within the organization. And then ultimately we're serving individuals and families. So I think in order to tell the whole story
Yeah.
of your programs and services, you do need to understand some of the operational aspects of
Mhm.
delivering on that mission.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said is really interesting to me because what I heard you say almost makes it seem like you're going to be better at your job as a development director when you know these things, right? Going the other direction, when you can speak to what's going on and why that needs to be critically supported, financially supported, it goes hand in hand, right? We don't
Yeah,
always talk
well,
about that.
I also think it's interesting, and there's a lot of value in bringing people together that don't live and breathe within a certain space.
Yeah.
And so I think that as leaders, we have the opportunity to do that in our organization. Maybe this leader isn't involved in operations. It doesn't mean that they don't bring some kind of lived experience that's going to add value to the conversation or add some value to solving uh,
Mhm.
a problem or finding an opportunity for the organization. So, you know,
Mhm.
I would encourage leaders to remember that your team members, regardless of their job title, come to you with a lot of lived experience,
Mhm.
and to tap into that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's brilliant. I think that's just like great advice, no matter where you are in the trajectory of your career. If you just want to stay in development, that's one thing, but it works. But if you want to move up or move along within your organization, that's great and grand advice. Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's talk about along the same lines, Tony, and you have been so instrumental in sharing this concept with us throughout our 1,600 episodes of the Nonprofit Show. Just had to put that in there. Talking about refining your communication skills. And this is one thing that I think is very interesting to look at it at two levels, internally and externally. Could you kind of talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I think in this particular topic, Julie, what I think about internally with your nonprofit, it really is setting that standard for communication, not only in the words that you use, but in the tone in which you deliver them. So again, folks start to mirror the tone, they start to mirror uh, the content and the specific words that you're using. So refining communication skills internally to me means being very intentional and being mindful about the words that you select, the time that you might share information, being mindful of how it might be received by an individual. And again, just reinforcing that tone often says more than the words themselves.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that, I think we're learning more and more as we discuss, to use your word, tone and leadership, that how we communicate is so much more important, to your point, than what it is we're talking about. Because right now there's such civil distress and how we communicate and how we share. I think leaning into that tone might get us further right now at this point in
Hmm.
time. At
Hmm.
this point in time, I mean,
And
certainly that we can't, we have to be specific, but I think we need to kind of step back maybe and say, what is it we're going to do? Bill Gates had a fascinating article in the Gates Notes. If you're not a subscriber to it, it's very interesting. He talks a lot about the global issues, and it's Gates Notes. It's free. You can sign up. But he talked about in this week's missive about hope and how he has had to redefine what he's hopeful about. And when he really sat with himself and looked at what is going on, because he's in the center of this communication storm, right? All these
mhm.
this information. He he refined and he found more hope than he thought existed in the
Oh,
nonprofit sector.
that's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it, right?
Oh, for
Um,
sure. Well, for
because
sure, because I don't know how many people, and I certainly don't, take the time to sit down and think about at this moment in time, what am I hopeful about,
yeah.
and what does that list look like,
Mhm.
and how can I improve and grow that list of
Mhm.
things that I'm hopeful about.
Yeah.
Uh, when we talk about external communication, Julia, I think the same things are true that I shared with internal.
Mhm.
Just being mindful that externally you may not share some of the things that you would share in internally. You may not- there just may be some things that you want to keep to yourself. But on
Sure.
both of those, one thing I wanted to mention too is around body language and communication. And so, especially externally, I mean, if I'm sitting here with my arms crossed and my head tilted the whole time I'm talking to you, what kind of message is that sending? Or if I just, can't just stop, um, moving my hands around, and how distracting that might be.
Yeah.
So, when we just think about communication, just think about the nonverbal part of that as well, both internally and externally.
I love it. Those wise words indeed. As we start to finish up, I want to really kind of touch on some different points that we can be doing all along our journeys in our profession that will help build our professional position. And I honestly, Tony, I think a lot of these things, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I think a lot of them will help build confidence, right? And when we're
Sure.
more confident, I think that we are more appealing to those people around us that might be looking to elevate our position or hire us, maybe even for a different organization. And so I would love to kind of have your reflection on some of these things.
Yeah, well, I think one of the best opportunities really is around public speaking,
Okay.
uh, and just getting yourself out there and finding opportunities to again share your experience, share what you've learned, uh, challenge the way that folks think on the day to day, deliver messaging like I've said many times, Julia, part of the joy that I get out of Fundraisers Friday is the hope that we are empowering folks to think differently about their work. We're empowering them to advocate for
Yeah.
themselves. We're just empowering them to, again, to reframe the way in which they communicate. And
Yeah.
public speaking is a dynamic part of fundraising. So lean into the dynamic part and the part that actually you're probably already very good at because you're in front of
Right.
you're in front of folks and you're delivering stories all the time. So lean into the public
Yeah.
speaking, I would say. Of course, social media is a place. Everyone has something to say on LinkedIn. So please join the noise. There's a lot of conversations happening on LinkedIn. I would say that based on my experience, uh, just working with others, and even when I reflect on my own behaviors, as you try to step into a space where you're really putting yourself out there, is you have to maintain some humility in this
Mm,
work. You have to be humble around
yeah.
the opportunities. And so when I join you on the show every week, Julia, I have the opportunity to share what I think and to share my lived experience. I don't sit here thinking that that's better than anybody else's shared experiences or lived experiences. I don't sit here and think that what I feel is any greater than anyone else feels. But it's an opportunity to share that, and I'm most grateful for it. So I would just say, as you step into the space where you're like, I'm going to be a thought leader. Uh, Step into the space and share what you know and what you know confidently, and step into the space knowing that your intention is to uplift others. And those titles as thought leader, community leader, dash leader will come to you based on that. Just
It's funny because I feel like I'm your personal hype man.
you are.
But you know what? I totally believe it. And I never realized that until you were actually on another episode last week as one of our co-hosts for a really important nonprofit that I've personally used called It Gets Better.
Uh,
And we were talking to this amazing leader who is literally saving lives day in and day out of LGBTQ plus youth,
mhm.
and predominantly in the suicide space, right?
Yep.
And I just like went off on Tony Bell, and I could tell afterwards because I was just blah, 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 and I could tell I made you really uncomfortable. And I felt badly, but then I was like, hell no, he is an expert. And it was an interesting, I don't know, refinement or whatever between really speaking my truth about what I know, how you work, your intelligence, your thought leadership, while you were there on camera. It was a weird thing, but it had to be said. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it was very kind. And, it's just one of those things where where it's like, I'm sitting right here, don't you? Even though it's all good, it's still like, I'm sitting right here. I'm
I
right
know.
here. But
It was,
but
yeah.
but going back to this conversation, I've always felt like it really does. You have to maintain a level of humility in this work, and you have to maintain a high level of gratitude
Yeah.
in this work. And if you're gonna become a leader because you're trying to fill some void within yourself, or because you need an ego boost, you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Right. And I think it's when it's inauthentic, it never is truly powerful, right? I mean, I think it lands softly. I want to add on some things that are a bugaboo for me, and that is having an active LinkedIn page, having a professional headshot that can have personality. I'm not saying you go to a studio and it's like superposed. I mean, I think it's better when it has some sort of uh, you know, unexpected expression, or you've been caught in a fun environment, but it's a professional image, right? It's not something that was just, taken without any thought. I think having a LinkedIn profile is essential. That is right now a modern business communication, and you must, even if you're not super active, be somewhat engaged, even if you just challenge yourself to one action a week,
Mhm.
one post a week. I don't care. And then the other thing is, I was reminded again at AFP last night in my community, when you don't have business cards you lose an opportunity to connect with people. And I know it's like maybe an old lady thing to say, but those people that are the leaders, they're carrying their business cards. Let's just put
Hmm.
it at that. And they're
Hmm.
passing them out. And
Hmm.
they get used. And I don't know, Tony, if you are moving more to the digital side or how you feel about this, but
I think it depends on the individual. I actually like both, quite honestly. So I've been to some events where folks have both. They're like, "Would you like my card or digital?" I'm like, "I'll take both because one, now I have this as the visual on my desk, and now I don't have to load it in my phone because I've used the QR code and now you're in my contacts. So you've saved me a little work by having the digital card. But I do just, and this is how I work. I do like having that visual that is, sitting on my desk or up on a board to remind me, that individual is there, and
yeah.
whatever follow up or keeping in touch I might want to do.
Yeah, I think it's important. I really do. And
Me
like I
too.
said, it's somewhat of a maybe a old school, but sometimes old school is just fine.
It's
Sometimes
just it's just fine.
sometimes it's proven and it works. Okay, last but not least, it's the soul searching question.
Oh.
It kind of speaks about why, what is your why? How am I a significant value to my nonprofit sector? This is an interesting question because we don't often sit with these types of questions, do we?
No, and I might even reframe it a little bit
Mhm.
just based on my experience. So when I think of how am I a significant value to my nonprofit sector, that's a lot.
It
Um,
is.
I mean it's so I'm
Yeah.
thinking more about how am I ensuring that I'm the best I can be to have the
Mm,
greatest impact
yeah.
on the nonprofit sector. I think that removes a lot of outside noise when you
Mhm.
focus on how can I be the best that I can be to meet the needs of the nonprofit sector. Uh,
Yeah. I
just
love that.
and that's just because I've been caught up and sort of even recently with this value proposition to my community, and especially as one of my friends says, I'm in the back nine of my career.
Mhm.
How does it feel when you no longer feel as valued as you once did?
Mhm.
And that is because you are allowing others to place the value. So
Mhm.
I had to shift that and say, what am I doing to make sure I feel valued in what I'm contributing, based on what I want to do, and really the level of exposure that I want to have, not the
Mhm.
level of exposure that other people are determining for me.
Right. I love it. Well, wise words indeed to end this episode of the Nonprofit Show, our 1600th episode. As you have been listening to Tony and myself, definitely, if you like this direction that we take, um, humor, humor less and quiet or not quiet. A lot of these tones are included in our book, The Architecture of Fundraising. It is available on Amazon for 19.99. It's a great read, and I think it's something that might help you along the knowledge of your career. If you've got a question, reach out to us. You can connect with us at info@americannonprofitacademy.com, and we would love to hear what you have to say, how we can support you, and what your journey and nonprofit fundraising is looking like these days. It's definitely ever changing. We are here with this ever changing sector because we have amazing partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Third Sector Company, Your Part Time Controller, and Intuit QuickBooks. These are the folks that make this show possible. And again, most of them have been with us since the beginning. Um, Now 7 years in, so it's pretty remarkable. Tony, as we end each and every episode, we leave with this message. I'm talking to you, my friend, as we move into the weekend, and it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well.